It's my pleasure to introduce Chris Sramek. Chris is a member of the Sramek family farm located in northwest Kansas, which raises wheat, milo, and Angus cows on 500 acres. In 2008, the farm became a charter member of the High Plains Food Cooperative, which is an innovative aggregator and online marketplace of locally grown and sustainable produced food in the tri-state area, including metropolitan Denver. The co-op brings fresh, healthy, and locally grown food year-round to consumers in a cost-effective manner, mostly via online ordering. High Plains Food Cooperative makes it possible for farmers to work together to meet growing demand for local, sustainable food. Farmers benefit from the marketing, selling, and delivering of their produce and prepared foods. Our marketplace, the High Plains Food Cooperative, brings fresh, healthy, locally grown and produce food to you, the buyer, in a cost-effective manner every other week during the summer months and monthly during the winter months. To hear more about this story, please give a warm Quivira welcome to Chris Sramek.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and thanks to Quivira Coalition for inviting us to be here today to talk about the story of the food co-op and a little bit of story of our personal journey as a farm member in the co-op. You'll hear from time to time, I'll be flipping my hat as a community development director. When this co-op started in 2008, and actually in the early 2000 timeframe, I was working as an economic development director in our community and had just returned home from doing a career in Kansas City as a meteorologist. So I am a trained meteorologist, climatologist from the University of Nebraska, returned home to help transition the family farm to our fifth generation of family farmers. And at the same time, the co-op was an economic development project in the community and then evolved over time to a more of a regional food hub. So I'll have that producer hat on at times, and then I'll go to the economic development part of this presentation, and then also wear a hat as a board member and a part of the co-op as a board member over the course of the 8 years of existence. Part of what we're experiencing with the co-op is some exponential growth in this time frame. I know Catherine was pretty nervous that I may not have made it here today because every time she kept calling, we were actually in the process of processing chickens and trying to get them freshly to the Denver restaurant market in a week, and right in the middle of all this and our growing season. And so I was putting this presentation probably up until last night before we came and got here. So I'm elated to be here. Wanted to start the presentation with a little bit of background about the co-op, give you a little more feeling of what it is, how it is operating as an organization. Again, we took some planning to get here. We have a mission and values. All the members of the co-op are united in this, both on the consumer and the producer side, that we are interested in locally grown food. We also have the passion to be environmentally sustainable, economically viable, and socially just. I hear this theme resolving throughout the room, wherever we are in this country and even nationally, that these are, food is tying us, our families and farms, and keeping us grassroots, tied to the land, and it's moving in a pace that's more in the triple bottom line economics or more of the socially driven type missions. It's a longer growth curve and more organic over time. But we're seeing more and more interest in millennials and younger farmers of trying to find a way to be part of this movement that we're seeing. Cultivate farmer and consumer relationships, and particularly with this co-op, the founding members, mostly being in rural Northeast Colorado, Southwest Nebraska, Northwest Kansas, have a particular interest in saving their communities and creating overall rural sustainability. So it does have an economic development mission, particularly in the producers, the small farming economies, to be the one of the drivers of reversing population decline in youth out-migration. We're a producer and consumer for-profit co-op. To become a member or a voting member of the co-op, it's a $100 lifetime share. You could be a producer member or a consumer member, or you have the option to be a $40 annual buying member of the co-op. We began as an online farmers market direct to the customer, and we are currently in the transition of becoming a regional food hub. An aggregator, we've grown from 12 original producers to nearly 50 from 3 states, and our customer base is 400, most of that being direct consumers in the Denver area and in Northwest Kansas, and we do have a new and evolving growth market in corner stores and restaurants. The food co-op utilizes an online ordering system. We have 21 hub and pickup points in Colorado and Northwest Kansas, and distribute over 1,000 locally grown food or value-added products 2 times per month. And we have about 5 to 10 core items now being delivered weekly into those restaurants, corner stores, and partnerships with other co-ops. Our margins are 18% on the volume, 25 to 30% on the direct retail. Sometimes you'll see them as CSA bundles. You directly market to a school, a college in particular, or building or health wellness group. Where you've experienced about a 40% annual growth from 2008 to 14 in that direct sales model, and more recently we're seeing that tick upwards to 60% with the switch over or becoming the food hub. We created a 5-year expansion plan that was completed to manage this anticipated growth. That was a presentation that we delivered at the Farmers Union convention 2 years ago. We'll see a lot of that in this presentation towards the end, and when we conclude, we'll talk about some of the barriers that we are seeing that are going to be actually opportunities as the co-op continues into 2017 and 18. Our startup and expansion support came from the Rocky Mountain and Kansas Farmers Union. We use the Co-op Development Center there in Colorado, the same Co-op Development Center that services New Mexico. And we started out with a RBAG grant to help us get the computer system up and running and develop a business plan. That original business plan back then was before the Food Hub lingo started to develop across the USDA and across the nation, and we were what you'd call modeled a virtual co-op after the Oklahoma model at that time, and used a series of connections, local economic development, using the USDA grants and our Farmers Union support to develop and start the co-op. We had a very conservative grassroots, humble start. It generated in a community where we had some local farmers that were direct selling beef to the Denver market. They went and saw a presentation by the Kansas Farmers Union in Lindsborg, Kansas, and at the same time, that was about when I returned home to become an economic development director, and this actually came into the office as one of the early projects to consider, and that relationship came to us through Ogallala Commons, Daryl Birkenfeld, and Bob Maylander with the Farmers Union, who are friends of the Quivira Coalition, and Courtney said, well, why don't we look at doing a model that Oklahoma's doing, and let's try that in the Denver market. And it was kind of like being from commodity agriculture and in that part of the world, it's like, boy, we got this market, and how are we going to get producers together to tackle what at that time looked like a very challenging project for just a small number of people interested. We started with a series of meetings. You'll see in this list, we went to, had some meetings in my hometown of Atwood, Kansas. We coincided them with some youth entrepreneurship fairs we were doing with our FFA and high school, of finding ways for young people to stay or return to their communities. And at the same time, We had these where we were having people from the Denver area come out and asking us we would like to see this co-op develop. So what had actually happened in March 29th of 2008, we had that last and final meeting where we said we're going to move on this concept that we're seeing in Oklahoma. Suzanne Mickelson with RMFU came out to Atwood, Kansas. We put a meet, eat, and greet together where we cooked the food and all coming from our local farms, and invited who we thought would be producers that could be interested in this. We had 30 producers show up from Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska. We organized a steering committee, and then I had our first delivery on May 15th, 2008 that consisted of 21 orders to 30 customers in Denver with a total sales of $785.39. This map kind of illustrates now where things have come. If you look at the one that's the aggregation, distribution, and processing map, let me see here, I got to actually point here, they said. It really starts with the production, the supply, and where the farmers are. And this gives you a pretty good picture. When you come back here, my hometown of Atwood, Kansas, these co-ops, in order to be able to produce the food and that for your customer you need, what's in red is a processing plant. Particularly out here, this co-op start was with meats. We had some beef producers, so we have a USDA processing plant. What you have in yellow is the ability to partner, or we have an anchor farm that has some cold storage, maybe a trailer or something to deliver that product. And what you have in these purple areas are actual pickup points or food hubs where your buying or volume groups are. And so what you're seeing is you kind of see the original group here and the growth and capacity over the years of what is developed. These pickup points were not necessarily original customers. What these are now are what we call backhaul. And as we pick up product every Thursday on the weekly delivery that goes to Denver, and on the monthly one it collects, and we have a trailer that comes down here from Nebraska, takes this route, comes into Denver, the main trailer comes here, and then we have a group of farms down in this area that come into Denver. The product is aggregated, sorted by individual order, and then goes back out to pickup points, Denver, then eventually back out to the rural communities. So that is, the system here. If you didn't have these red points in these communities, it would be very hard for this business to grow. You've got to have that processing and aggregation infrastructure. What's very different about our co-op is what you guys think of a co-op is we don't have a storefront. Our main infrastructure is these aggregation points. And the only one that's really developing into more of a larger, maybe food hub type thing that could have some potential storefront is this rural one in northwest Kansas, where it could be, it's kind of doing that backhaul and some of the on-the-ground community grassroots efforts, farm-to-school programs and that going on in these rural communities here. This activity on the Front Range is working with other groups, other co-ops, distributors, and tying this product and this product into their mixes. There's a sister co-op down here, Ark Valley Co-op, that brings the melons and the things from the Ark Valley, the chili peppers, into the system. We've got another sister co-op in the San Luis Valley, so we have the Salida, and then down in Durango with Southwest Fresh. So all that stuff flows into the system from these points where you don't see our activity on the map, but there is on the ground food hub, collection of food, direct sales and production going on in those areas. And even across the country, what this is starting to look like is a spider web network of food hubs and ongoing community grassroots efforts to connect our local food system. When you talk about the customer side, it's pretty obvious. The heart and soul of everything is downtown Denver. Boulder and this region kind of has its own system going on, and then we are growing exponentially to the south towards Colorado Springs And again, you're seeing this backhaul development, we call it, in rural northwestern Kansas. So moving on from there, we're kind of moving into the terms of what a food hub is now defined. When we started, we didn't know what to call ourselves, so we said we are an online farmers market. We're an extension of that. We started calling us an online CSA, but now I think it's quite obvious that using the new USDA terms is for the producer, we are the first mile aggregator for the rural producer and the last mile distributor, both in the rural communities and in the Denver market for that same system. Not a really a storefront. We may work with co-ops that do have a storefront, but we are connecting our values and our systems in strategically into our partnerships. So the USDA definition of a food hub is a business organization that actively manages the aggregation, distribution, and marketing of source identified food products, primarily from local or regional producers, to strengthen their ability to satisfy wholesale and the institutional demand as they grow. Food aggregator, another term that you're going to hear, develops the producer connections, relationships, and provides support, then sources the food products, links the production with the market need, and then provides the logistics coordination, which in the terms that we were using for the High Plains Co-op are drop sites, labeling, tracking, pickup and delivery, sorting, distribution, and establishing those value relationship chains to the end consumer, all the way from the production through the packaging, distribution, the food hub, and even to our retail partners. If anybody in that system really isn't into this triple bottom line economics or slow money system, it's kind of, it's developing its own markets. You kind of have we call ourselves, we're not Whole Foods, and we're not Safeway, and that we're kind of in between, and I think that's what we're seeing across the country and everywhere is, knowing your farmer, knowing the integrity of the product, knowing how they're treating their livestock and the soil that they're raising the food on, and the families, the stories of the families that are producing that. So moving ahead, this system here that we talked about this a little bit. This is the growth of the co-op. You'll see those early years is very humble, conservative, grassroots, varying on the type of year. That was mostly a monthly delivery, and then you kind of see there in 2010, 11, 12, we started doing the bi-weekly deliveries, and as we get in to our switch last year, 2015, we did the bi-weekly deliveries during the growing season, and then we added the with 5 partners, or we call them volume buyers. They were either a CSA or somebody that had a corner market working directly with a community in Denver. They would buy some proteins and eggs in volume to kind of help us test our distribution, our cold chain, our aggregation capacities, and move more into being able to do a weekly delivery and keep growing those individual farm producer items. We really feel that our retail market, that online, direct order, once a month, buy your product individually, allows a producer to come into the co-op, whether it's new or an older producer trying to transition to an organic farm, any of that, just to learn the basics and the system of food safety and how to pack, and it's kind of a growing ground and a place to nurture new and emerging farmers, keep them in a safer environment, something they may never grow out of that, but to grow these food hubs to a level which the food hub industry standard or food benchmarks that Wallace Center and the USDA have done, you need to reach a sales of between $600,000 and $1 million to be able to pay for enough support staff and help and your transportation and distribution loops. As you can see, this year we saw this exponential growth, and most of that to this $400,000 levels happened in June, about the time I was getting called to come to this conference. And chaos, as you can figure, was kind of happening internally. We were seeing, this weekly delivery and, production and supply and all the things that go into those logistics, because we're farmers and we don't have any paid staff. And so we have board members that are doing the accounting, and one board member managing the distribution and that, and then trying to farm. And then in some cases, particularly with our poultry group, we added our own MPU mobile processing unit so we could ramp up production and do this to work. So between wearing, being the processor, the farmer, the distributor, and the accountant, you can imagine what kind of pressures are happening internally within that co-op. And we'll call that the teenage stage if you're out there in a business and trying to grow it to sustainability, particularly in this where everything is supposed to be slow. And when you're out there planning or looking at developing a food hub, this is, if you go back to the USDA and the benchmarks, the history has been that it takes 7 to 11 years to grow one of these types of co-ops from infancy to that $1 million mark. That is shortening because of that change in the consumer demand, and that window now is now more like 3 to 5 years. And you're seeing models across the country, particularly back east, doing that, and on the coast. As you start moving into this market where we're in, that's very arid and diverse, and the food trends differentiate a lot. There's some challenges that go there, but we're still trying to manage that into the same time frame. That's where the USDA programs and grants and that come into play. Now, we don't want to pass the notion that you have to have grants and that type of support to make this type of business work or any of these sustainable farming ventures. It is a tool or a bridge that is available to shorten that window from 7 to 11 years of development down to the 3 to 5, and allow you to build those capacities that may be missing, whether it's your cold chain distribution, within your organization, the farming, the production, the processing, and those type of networks. Annual sales, you saw I want to show this orders chart to you, what it's doing on the other end of that. So the retail individual order side has a lot of volunteerism going on, individual packaging, volunteer staff and that, whereas the weekly deliveries is kind of moving more into that professional staff, the delivery drivers, the orders in the last year have gone down, but the volume and the size of the order has gone up. So you're taking some stress from one side, adding it to the other, but it is what is happening there. You still have your retail side. We did see a dip in our retail side this year. It basically just plateaued and stayed the same from last year, that individual order. Mostly that was due to because we had to switch software, and which was geared as more of a consumer-driven software to now, which is more into distribution, logistics, and that. We didn't have the consumer ease of the ordering system and that. Correcting that and putting some money into that area will again probably bring that back to balance, and we'll hopefully see that change moving forward. This part of the presentation now, I'm going to kind of shift more from what's actually going on with the co-op, and for those of you here that are maybe looking at a business like this or venture, what the planning looked like to do this. And again, I'm going to go back to point with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, the Co-op Development Center. Suzanne from the beginning kept saying, bylaws, get your goals and your plans and write them down and do this. And all of us say your entrepreneur and your producers are like, why, let's go, we're ready. So it took an extensive time. This was, again, we went back to the RBEG program, Rural Business Enterprise Grant, and it's a 50-50 match. We raised all the way from support from the Farmers Union to local economic development, and even some of our members contributed to raise 50% of that match. And then the USDA ended up with a $60,000 grant to extensively map out this path or this growth and what kind of food hub or model would work in this challenging environment of distance from the production, multiple food shed, multiple food co-ops, and a huge market sitting along the front range of the Rockies in Colorado. So the next three slides are kind of the organization and development of that. Obviously, we went into this, we were outgrowing the capacity of our original plan. It was already completed, that vision was, and where do we go? Do we just stay like we are as an online food hub and really not a sustainable model, but it isn't losing money, and maybe it just stays that, or do we look at something and become a leader and try to go back to our original mission of economic development, survival of our rural communities. That is what this plan is built around. There's opportunity for the processing jobs, the individual farmers, there's management and positions within these hubs and within these food co-ops that is needed, professional accounting. So it isn't just the labor, the farm labor job creation, there is professional jobs and opportunities in there. Of course, we're going to have expansion concerns. Is this realistically going to be able to hit this target? Who's going to grow the food? Which producer is going to take the time and energy to diversify and become a processor and tackle that gap and move into a market like chickens, and you're a wheat and cattle farmer by nature, and I'm going to put my personal farm hat on and take that venture to change. And it's, that's what we call an anchor producer, somebody that's going to invest probably more energy and time above the $100 membership to make this on. If you're going to see a 600K or to 1 million supply into your co-op, you need about 5 to 10 of those anchor type producers, selling the 5 to 10,000 in volume a month. So we broke it down into 4 areas. We're going to put a project team together. We're going to look at market. That was something we weren't quite as concerned about. We were experiencing it. It was right in front of us. Our biggest thing with the market was what next one do you engage from the retail? You can't go directly to the institution. Is the restaurant market there? I mean, are they going to pay? Is it going to, there's lots of issues we had to look at to try to see what the stepping stone was. We came to realize that volume buyers and CSA and healthy community activity are a nice stepping stone to allow you to learn these processes and get your price in line. Production, where's this going to come from? How are we going to grow our own producers? Distribution, we got safety regulations and all that coming down cold chain supplies. You get bigger, you got more of that. Maybe we need to outsource it. Need to start looking at things. And then organizational. How are we going to go from a farmer co-op, do-it-all type board to a professional, strategic thinking, growth-oriented organization? So the planning process, we recognized, embraced that, had to come out with our scope and our budgets in the 4 areas that we were going to work on. Did that type of work, and we engaged our sponsors, raised the funding, assembled a top-notch project team, and we broke it down to those 4 areas and tried to find the best that we could afford in those areas and build a 5-year plan. Worked with somebody to follow that work plan. Internally, my position in the co-op is consumer vice president of consumers, moved more from a day-to-day role of answering the customer complaints and the producer complaints and issues to strategically sticking on this plan and working with the consultants in that. This is the project team we put together. I won't go through that, but again, it was a technical team of consultants from Colorado to the University of Nebraska to portions of Kansas. So it was a regional effort with lots of expertise, and most importantly, we engaged the producers. This is kind of what the results and what came out of it in our market expansion. Obviously, the market was there, distribution, the capacity, we've talked about that. Knowing your customers, getting the profile analysis, which most of the, we know the market in Denver. It's most of our young people that have moved to Denver to become professionals that have some income disposable and still want to have that tie to the farm, whether if their kids can come out and see our farms or know they're getting healthy food in that. And we just started focusing. That's where we put our pickup points. We go into those communities to do a strategic relationship with a church or a developing local co-op or healthy communities effort. And that's where our pickup points are positioned, our aggregation points. The production expansion, we surveyed all the producers in the co-op and identified the ones that had the skills and desire to become one of those growth producers. And we decided that we had enough poultry. We're going to anchor this and get our first product up is the poultry, and then focus on the sexy vegetables, since nobody out there is really vegetable growers like you guys have out here and in Colorado. So we engaged on that intensively, and I'd have to say that in the last 2 years, those have grown. I think we estimate about 285% vegetables and poultry in this system. We went from 3 gardens in 2008 to we have, I think, 7 hoop houses and some greenhouses being put in and those type of things. We're just, that's where the growth is, and focusing your resources on those producers. Distribution, you saw it in the slides. We're focusing on that main hub back in Kansas to get those growth producers' products in there to Denver as quickly as we can, and then we're going to rely on working with other co-ops and distributors to build that system. And our organization we're currently in that. We've asked all of our board members to think about their role and where they're moving in the future. I think every meeting this year, that's how we start our meeting off. What is your current role? What you don't like about it? What you're going to do about it? And who's going to replace you? So that is the strategy that we're taking, and really trying to engage those young, new consumer, all the thing to transition that, get this website and e-commerce platform upgraded, and make sure we're strategic and continuing our vision. The barriers and solutions that we currently have seen on the new producers and supply, that's it. Without the production, the supply of the new producers, we're heavily looking at land banking efforts to get land affordably into the hands of these entrepreneurs. FFA, F4H ties are extremely important in our tech and junior college programs. We're going to do a producer engagement system within the co-op, which will work with local lenders, foundations to do bridge financing to what the bank won't traditionally finance without the collateral. We're going to back them. The co-op's going to professionally back them, and we're getting lenders on board to work with those growth business entrepreneur producers. Then on the supply, diversify it, we'll make more of it. We're developing a Colorado Food Hub network currently with Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. This will be the 4 producer co-ops that I shared on that map, collectively working together and hopefully building an overarching ordering and distribution center, partnering together. There's going to be some challenges with that over the next couple of years, but that's where we're moving to, processing distribution. We're finding it. You saw those red marks, renovating those vacant facilities, that Eco-Devo mindset. They're setting out there in them small communities. If you can get a hold of one of those and an entrepreneur with some experience, put them together. The mobile, we've got a mobile poultry. There is a mobile beef and pork unit in our area that's not in the co-op that's in operation. Those are options. Again, a lot of your USDA programs and grants are focusing on this cold storage and distribution loans and grants for your organizations. And then, the community mobilization and that, something that I'll throw that Eco Devo hat back on that we're very proud of in Northwest Kansas that's creating the new stuff on the ground is this entrepreneurial development and innovation centers. We're tying the community philanthropy, the local entrepreneurship ties with those youth, and moving that forward and creating a food policy council. In Western Kansas, we have an 8-county commissioner endorsed policy council to support this work. That's pretty incredible and innovating for a rural community. And then work with your professionals on the other barriers when it comes to GAP certification and the regulation type activities.
How do the people who buy food from your co-op know that that's the food they want and that's the food coming from the farms that they want to support?
When you get the what software?
No, do they know, are
yeah.
the soils healthy? Do they know?
Yeah, the software allows that to happen because every farm has their story. The farmers work with the co-op. They own the product from the end, from the production to the end. We're just a brokerage option for them. The stories are there, and if there's questions, it's communicated directly back to the farmers. Most of our farmers know the customers, and they visit back and forth before all that's there. We do checks on the farms to make sure they're abiding by the practices they're listing and that, but that's how that is managed.
Hold on, managing two things. This woman hasn't asked a question yet.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I am curious about, you mentioned earlier how you guys are kind of in between Whole Foods and Safeway, like maybe economically, and I think that can relate really positively to the disappearance of mid-sized farms in the United States, and I'm wondering, now that there's such a bimodal distribution with like farmers markets and then, Monsanto farmers, how can your co-op address that either by supporting mid-sized farms or in this really efficient, affordable distribution of small farmers' produce to a large, feed a community like Denver,
Yep.
Not just from a farmer's market?
And where we're positioned out there in the high plains, we're growing the mid-size farmer. They've kind of disappeared in this traditional system, so that's what we are actually doing is growing them. Now, depending on the market, there is some mid-sized farms out there that don't need this co-op model and have already got their systems going directly into the marketplace. When we align our values with them, those are some of our partners that you saw on there, or some of the other mid-sized farms we may be using, sharing some distribution or some aggregation with them. So it's collectively working together and filling that void and growing more mid-sized producers.
I want a big round of applause for Chris Sramek.